Good morning, everybody. I'm Dominika Bychawska-Siniarska, and a senior advisor at the Prague Civil Society Center, a co-organizer of the conference. Within our Central European program, we distribute grants to small and medium-sized media in Central Europe, operating in 5 countries currently. And I am pleased to moderate a panel devoted to the media regulations that are in place within the EU, having excellent guests today. The first one, which we already had the pleasure to listen, Maja Sever, the president of the European Federation of Journalists, but most and foremost, more than 30 years of experience journalist. We also have Lucy Sikorova from the European Center for Press and Media Freedom from the Supervisory Board and the freelance journalist. The European Center for Press and Media Freedom is playing a crucial role in advocating for legal changes at the EU level and also within the Council of Europe. We also have Professor Tadeusz Kowalski, a member of the Broad Council of Poland and a professor at the Warsaw University, and Teresa Zaip, Amsterdam University researcher orienting at AI, media and democracy, and also media concentration. So we would like to discuss today the media regulation sphere within the European Union. We have on the table already the Digital Service Act and the Audiovisual Directive, and 3 initiatives that are coming. And this is a very timely moment to discuss this because we entered in the last phase of the trialogue, so we really hope that the directive regulations would be adopted by the end of the year or at the beginning of next year. And I'm talking here about the SLAP directive. Just yesterday, as mentioned by Maya, we had the trialogue outcome, so we do hope that the text is utmost protective to journalists. We also have the AI Act, which is on the table, and the European Media Freedom Act, which we would like to scrutinize today. The act is mostly focusing on ensuring a pluralistic media scene in the European Union, focusing on captured media, on ensuring independent public service media, protecting editorial independence, having some rules on the transparency of media ownership, and mostly, and what is raising some controversies, are the safeguards to ensure media pluralism and prevent media concentration. So I would like to ask my guests today to discuss and try to look at all those acts, but mostly at the European Media Freedom Act, and answer to the question to what extent they are really replying to the current need. So first of all, how much they will impact the situation in countries where media public media especially are captured by the state, mentioning Hungary, Poland, Slovenia at some point, and others. How much it is reacting and is up to date with the models of media consumption, and how much the media consumption is changing, but also how much it is, and I think foremost from a business perspective, and I know most of you journalists and editors, publishers present here are struggling with the distorted competition due to the operation of online platforms. So I hand my floor. Sorry for this bit lengthy introduction, but I would like you to stick to 10 minutes presentation, so we will still have some time for a round of questions. Maya, the floor is yours.
Okay, first I want to apologize, and also apologize to Marek. I don't know where he is, because I was planning to prepare the presentation, but I have to be honest with you. I had really, really difficult and hard task for my daily work as a journalist, because we are preparing the team about violence against women. And I really think I won't speak now in details, but I hope that you will accept my apologies, that I don't have prepared presentation. I really run all around Croatia and try to prepare this story before coming in Prague. So I will just probably be then shorter than 10 minutes because I don't have slides. But as I emphasized on the beginning, on my introduction speech, in these days, when journalists are faced with so many threats, not just from politicians and the people in power, but it's like with this raising of populism in all countries, this kind of narrative to accuse journalists for everything. I was like thinking, you know, it's not just now that far-right politicians accuse journalists that they are guilty for I don't know what, but also most of them, it's their narrative today. But not that, but also, as I mentioned in a speech, they find so many ways to threat and to make pressure and to intimidate journalists. So that's the reason we need a robust framework to protect free, professional, quality journalism. It's been like 15 months that negotiation on negotiation about the European Media Freedom Act, very ambitious intention of European Commission and Vera Jourova to try to ensure protection of journalists. On the beginning, European Federation of Journalists proposed with a lot of other international organizations a lot of amendments because we demanded a stronger mechanism which will ensure a real implementation of this act on a national level. You know, in the beginning, it was like a little bit even surprising, like countries as Hungary and Poland said, okay, we can, but why? Because they can approve, they can adopt some rules, but if there is no mechanism and there is no measures to implement those recommendations, it's just a paper on the, it's just a paper, just a document. So now, then we can say that Parliament during debate really adopted a lot of even amendments and adopt a strong European Media Freedom Act, and unfortunately with this Chapter 4, which was proposed by France, of possibility of spying of journalists. You correct me if I'm something wrong, because you have to know I'm not media expert. In European Federation of Journalists, we have great director Renate Schroeder, who really knows European Media Freedom Act, I think, you know, in every word. She's very, very, very supportive for me. She helps me. And I'm really present mostly her works, but so Lucy, you also correct me if I'm somewhere wrong, but we all know that French proposed this Chapter 4, changing of Chapter 4 of possibility of to spy a journalist if it's national security in a question. We really strongly oppose to that. It is still on the table. December 15 will be another meeting in a trialogue, and this will be the main point of this debate. But okay, we'll see. As I said, I asked you also to raise your voice against it. We have to use every opportunity, and every little voice is important. It is really. Tweet, article, or as I said, funny video on TikTok. I'm just making a joke. I know of importance of new platforms. Don't think that I'm like some kind of, I don't know, old-fashioned type who just want to write article in the paper, but let's use all our opportunities to raise the voice against this possibility. But I won't talk in details about articles. I hope, Lucy, you will. I will just emphasize this Article 5, which seeks to protect the independence of public media service, which is very important, not just because I'm journalist and public media service, but because I really believe that public media services are important for all media environments. It should be like a pillar. We have to fight to defend public media services and idea of this, and should also adhere to parliament positions, actively protecting the public media services from government interference and ensuring adequate, predictable and sustainable funding. Negotiations should avoid the weak language proposed by Council, calling on member states to seek to ensure the independence of public media service. This is also very important. Probably you know, or you all know, that there is intention to weaken this Article 5. I think that this point is also crucial in regulations. I hope that will be opportunity to talk about other articles, and Lucy has a presentation, and she will probably go through European Media Freedom Act. I will just say a few more sentences about other regulation you mentioned, Dominika. It's SLAP. We are waiting for final text, and we are very nervous about it, because everyone who works in journalism these days know how is important to find a way to stop those pressure with the slaps. I see here in the audience my colleagues from Serbia who really knows what does it mean. I hope that you will share also somehow your experience. It's really, really, I hope that maybe even during this day the final text will be published so we can comment on it. About AI, I just finally want to invite you to follow on, it's published on most of website of International Journalist Organization and also in European Federation of Journalists website, Paris chapter about journalism in AI. My computer is so slow. Okay. We were part of the group formed, initiated by Reporters Without Borders and chaired by Nobel Prize laureate journalist Maria Reza. They worked on the document, and they published Paris Charter on AI and the journalism. I will just emphasize 5 most important topics. It is another regulation, and I think that it will be valuable for you to read it. It's emphasized that ethics must govern technological choices within the media. Human agency must remain central in editorial decisions. The media must help society to distinguish between authentic and synthetic content with confidence. The media must participate in a global AI governance and defend the valuability of journalism when negotiating with tech companies. AI system owners must credit sources, respect intellectual property rights, and provide just compensation to right holders, including journalists. This was specific request from EFJ I had to add. So the beginning of regulation from our journalist perspective is here in Paris chapter on AI in journalism. We will continue to talk and about those topics for this panel, but that's it, maybe more than 5 minutes.
Thank you, Maya. A bit more than 5 minutes, but then you manage excellently, so thanks you for that. And maybe let's jump. I have a lot of questions and remarks to what you have been said, but I will leave it to later on. And let's jump to Lucy, who will dive a little bit deeper into the European Media Freedom Act with her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Dominika, for introducing me thanking Maya for stressing these important points, and thanks a lot to the whole EFJ, who really is a big support with the new EU legislation, helping a lot and lobbying for all of us, the legislation. So I have some presentation prepared, actually a boring one on legislation as how else, but I hope to keep your attention for a few minutes. So I was asked to talk about the impact on díky moc. Impact of the EMFA. Okay, the mother of this law, Vera Jourova, actually hates this shortage EMFA, so European Media Freedom Act. Let's call it Act, or however. So on our part of Europe, so on the Central Eastern European countries. So I dared to steal a quotation of our dear colleagues Gábor Poliak from Hungary, who said or commented on this law, too much for others, too little for us. And indeed, this was a really very good point how to describe our position of Central Eastern European countries compared to almost the whole rest of the Europe, actually, because at the beginning, when this draft law was introduced, there were many worries if that won't be a censorship. Actually, until the very end, still not everyone's convinced. Especially big publishers were very loud against, wanted to just stop this initiative at the very beginning. So, but we managed. We are almost at the end, and let's see what comes out, because it's not finished yet. Okay. Yeah, so just to remind very briefly on the beginning, on December 21, when the Commission started or opened the public consultation, what I found interesting was that so the Commission received more than 900 replies, and the majority of them, as you see, came from Slovakia. What does it say when we see the current development in Slovakia? I checked, not all, but had a look what these replies or feedback said, and really the majority of this contribution was about saying like, I'm against the censorship and the switching of alternative media. So I think that's a lot said by this already, where the Slovakia is, and now we see the country might be the first, hopefully, to profit from a strong Media Freedom Act if we have it. Yeah. So the next. I think it takes a bit. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, but yeah. So sorry if I did something wrong. Did I switch it off? Yeah. So just to continue. So to make sure the EMFA, the law, was not prepared or presented to regulate the media, but the environment to enable media, independent media, to exist. Díky moc. So I just picked out few most important points from our point of view, especially for our countries. So I will go through these points quickly. Article 4 mentioned by Maya already, protection of journalistic sources, very important, but you highlighted a lot. So it's basically saying that member states and the EU should not oblige media and journalists to reveal identity and other information about their sources. And we had, and the Council argued with the national security, so they want to keep the right to put spyware, set spyware on journalists and so on. So, of course, it's dangerous. We saw just recently the French case of Ariane Lavrilo, pardon my French, I don't know, so who worked on the Egypt papers, but we also just this month had a case in Czech Republic even of unacceptable pressure put on one of the most famous journalists, Jaroslav Kmenta, who was asked by the General Inspection of Security Forces to reveal his sources and provide documents, and even under threat of fine. So it's obvious we really need a strong law on this. Yeah, as Maya said, that will be clear after the 15th of December, because this point will be on the table on trialogues on that day. The next point, the independence of editorial freedom. Okay. And I think it needs a bit, yeah. So independence of editorial freedom of public service media. So there are 2 points most important. That's member states are asked to ensure independence of management and board members and provide adequate funding. Of course, we will just see in a practical life then how effective these points are. Our Hungarian and previously also Polish colleagues found the point of the EU rules on appointment of management and board members especially important, and they were convinced this could have an impact on their current situation. Again, a Czech experience showed that these transparent rules are actually not enough, might be not sufficient. So very important is also the election procedure. So we have now a new amendment to the Czech public service media law, and just recently it was decided that the 1/3 of the board members will be elected also by the Senate. So the procedure will not be or is not anymore decided only by the parliament, which was the main reason why the boards of public service media were not always seen as independent previously. The adequate funding, that's also a question. Yes, our, again, Hungarian colleagues made a point that the editorial independence can be jeopardized not by underfunding, but also overfunding. So I again stole a quotation of Gábor Poliak on this. Czech and Slovak public service media were long-term underfinanced. License fee hasn't been increased since a very long time, and now Slovakia. It's a question if that's a new Hungary. As you saw, now there's no more license fee, and public service media are since July financed directly from the state budget. This is seen as especially dangerous regarding independence. And the Prime Minister, of course, even is very hostile to the media, even declared to go after the neck of the TV director, and now even trying to stop the access of some other independent media or the biggest media into the government office, and so it's starting to be really a dangerous development there. But as everybody of you obviously knows, in the Article 5, which is focusing on public service media, there was also one point which was especially seen as especially problematic. This point 3. The European Parliament proposed an amendment where MEPs required adequate funding to allow also new content and media forms for technical development. And this was seen by publishers, even those independent ones, as a dangerous direction. So they were afraid of an unfair competition. But both risk of overfunding and unfair competition should be actually solved if there would be a compliance with this Commission communication, which was issued already 2009. So this sentence should, according to our information now, be left out. Okay. So I have to be more quick now. I'm not too much in detail. The problematic issue in this regard is obviously that this law doesn't define the public mission. There are starting just discussions on this. So another point was important, again, independence of regulatory authorities who actually should be responsible and have the competence to issue assessments on the situation in each country. So not only Czech journalists and media experts are afraid of how this would look like if the competence would lie just on the current regulators, audiovisual regulators. That's why, just to skip to the next point, that's why we proposed, or through the MEPs, proposed an amendment with the help of EFJ again, to include an expert group to ask, to put an obligation to these regulators when making assessments, to ask professional representatives of the profession, so journalists, media experts, also publishers, to ensure at least some relevant outcomes of these assessments, which should be used then as further steps of the EU, possibly. So, a very important point, Article 17. Yes, moderation of media content by online platforms, mentioned also by my Dominika previously. This article says that very large online platforms shall provide functionality allowing media services to make a self-declaration, and based on this, if develops should decide to limit or restrict the content, remove the content, which is actually an obligation by DSA, so again, EMFA wanted to make sure that news media are not affected by this. So there's a new article on this which would require big platforms to avoid this, and there should be a 24 hours deadline to announce the intention to make a step to remove a content, and yes, to discuss it in prior with not only media providers, but also with regulators or self-regulatory mechanisms. We see that's very important to promote self-regulation, not initiatives like Journalism Trust Initiative or similar, in regard to make the see what's recognized media and what not, what's news media or what not. I'm going to finish just very quickly now. Okay. And then we have we have two articles on the assessments, which I mentioned previously. That's a question: who will be the authority who will create the assessments, and also the board and commission itself could actually at the end, okay, so make these assessments and undertake some further steps in case they think there some rules were broken. What may be the most important points, one sentence more, the Article 24, which is transparent, non-discriminatory rules on allocation of public funds, because this is really influencing the media market when the public state advertisement is allocated to loyal media and not independently, not in a transparent way. In Hungary, this was even 80% allocated to pro-government media, but we saw the same situation in Czechia, in other Central Eastern European countries. So We are waiting now for the final decision. This is not clear yet either how effective this point will be. There was a threshold of 1 million population to which units would these rules apply. Obviously, we would need these rules, these transparency rules, to apply for, if possible, to all units, also to small local regional authorities. So let's hope in that and keep fingers crossed for an efficient EMFA. We really need it, and let's hope. Thank you for your attention, and keep your attention further. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Sorry for being the timekeeper, but I really want to save some time for questions. So actually, Lucy already gave a framework for Professor Kowalski's speech, and I would like to ask you, if possible, to give us a little bit of input from a perspective of a broadcasting authority, regulatory body member from a captured environment. How much for you, in the situation we had before election in Poland, EMFA would be of a help? I have a... Both. If you could, both, but also please be optimistic for the future. So I have the impression that predicting actually and writing the regulation, not necessarily the EU had all in mind how much the situation can be distorted at the local level, and how much the regulation could be badly implemented. And when I read EMFA for the first time, I was struck that creating this EU body with members of different regulatory bodies, I didn't really see how much sending someone for a captured body like the Polish Broadcasting Council or the Hungarian one, how much they could really be a body safeguarding pluralism and freedom of expression, and how much authority they would have having these members around them. So I just have the impression this was not really taken into consideration. So if you could refer to this point, we would appreciate.
Thank you, Dominika. I will try. However, we are in a moment when there is no any final text of EMFA. So it is always difficult because, as I know, yesterday it was the last meeting of Trilogue. We don't know what was the result at the moment. So I want to say about only few aspects of EMFA, because it's not time to discuss about everything. In this case, I also relate to some what was before the election, those period. And I want to say something about the political aspect of EMFA, because it's not neutral. And maybe that's the reason why we have some problems with that. Of course, EMFA, the aim of the EMFA is intended to strengthen the editorial independence of media companies in common market and protect them from unjustified, disproportionate and discriminatory national measures, thereby preserving the pluralism in the European media landscape. I want to concentrate on some selected issues, including included in a draft of EMFA, based on initial proposals, because at the moment we are still in a trilogue. Protecting editorial independence, such point. The draft is intended to oblige member states to respect the effective editorial independence of media service providers and improve the protection of journalistic sources. In addition, media service providers will have to ensure transparency of ownership through public disclosure of such information and apply measures to guarantee the independence of individual information and apply measures, yes. The principle of ownership transparency is quite obvious. However, and it is also a certain experience we have in the regulatory body, media companies very often have extremely complicated multi-story ownership structures, making it impossible or very difficult to identify the so-called real beneficiary. We had to think about that we also have a very, very big media group which consists of several companies, lots of companies. The situation we have in Poland, for example, Warner Bros., one of those examples. The problem which was discussed and important from the regulatory point of view is a structural cooperation between independent regulators. This new European Board for Media Services, composed of national media regulators, is proposed. The new board is to be functionally independent of the European Commission and is to promote effective and consistent application of EU media law framework, in particular by assisting Commission in preparing guidelines on regulatory issues concerning application of Audiovisual Directive and EMFA. It will be also an issue to issue opinions on national measures and decisions affecting media markets and media concentration. The Council is to replace the current ERGA by this new board. The issue has been a subject of discussion international there as well. Independence in relation to European Commission is one thing, but the question of opinions on concentration is another. For example, in Poland, the regulator has no any competence to examine market concentration. This task belongs to the Office of Competition and Consumer Protection. It's completely independent other body. Next issue, independent public media. Where public media exists, their funding should be adequate and stable to ensure editorial independence. Supervisory board and management board in public media should be appointed on a transparent, open, and non-discriminatory manner. Public media providers are to ensure pluralism of information and opinion in an unbiased manner in accordance with the public mission. However, regulation of public media is the domain of individual states, and in general, laws ensure the achievement of such goals as impartiality and pluralism, among others. The problem is the enforcement of existing law. It's not the problem, the formulation of law. In Poland, despite of the Constitutional Court ruling that is unconstitutional to assign to the National Media Council the authority to appoint supervisory board and management boards of public media, the desired legal status has not been restored for 8 years. Unfortunately, also the regulatory body, that is the National Broadcasting Council, which I am a part since 1 year, has not taken appropriate action in this regard. However, I proposed several times, but the majority was not interested to take any action. Media pluralism. EMFA is to require member states to assess the impact of market concentration of media pluralism and editorial independence. It is also required that any legislative, regulatory or administrative measures taken by member states would not affect the media be duly justified and proportional. This is a very important issue, but again, it concerns the actions of the regulator responsible for competition of the market. In recent years, in Poland, we have 2 examples of completely different approaches to regulation in this respect, depending on the political interest of ruling party. Thus, in the case of acquisition of thousands of regional local press titles and internet portals by the oil company Orlen, due to the ruling party's desire for political control over the media, no assessment was made on the impact of pluralism. It is also worth mention that Orlen, furthermore, acquired leading press distribution company Ruch. The situation was completely different in the case of purchase of majority stake in Eurozet by Agora Group where it was hypothesized that competition could be restricted and pluralism threatened. So, the same regulatory body, completely different, react to those two situations. Ultimately, in the court procedure that lasted nearly 2 years, the decision of regulatory body was overturned. Transparency of public advertising. EMFA is to introduce new requirements for allocating state media advertising, so that is transparent and non-discriminatory. EMFA also envisions increasing the transparency and objectivity of audience measure systems that affect media advertising revenues, particularly online. As a person who for several years carried out monitoring of the expenditure of state-owned companies and central ministries and offices, I know that this is where the political transfer of significant funds to government-friendly media was taking place, with almost total disregard for critical media, regardless of their often very good market position. This was a kind of mechanism of buying the favor of formally independent media, in fact, with features of political corruption. So, some general comments, because we have not time to discuss about everything. What I see the problem from maybe a political aspect. The political essence of EMFA is in fact a step toward increasing the powers of European community vis-à-vis the nation states. A step towards the development of the federation model, which obviously causes disputes and give rise to different attitudes towards the proposed changes. We had to have it in mind every time. The second, this regulation concerns the implementation of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and is a part of the concern for the welfare of European citizens. Third, the broad scope of the regulation carries with numerous dangers, namely, the mechanism introduced will be too general and, in fact, often impossible to implement, or, on the contrary, may be proved to excessively repressive toward certain regulated sectors. That's the citation you gave, it was just perfect. For some it will be too small, for some it will be too much. Today, we are in a reality in which all media are digital, or at least are also in digital form. So the argument that radio and press, for example, were not subject to the kind of regulation that was characteristic of audiovisual media in the analog is not correct in my opinion. At the end, I want to relate to the position of the Broadcasting Council, which I am a member. The National Broadcasting Council did not discuss about EMFA and did not develop a common position. At the ERGAM meeting, the chairman of the council objected to EMFA, but in fact presented his own opinion. It is not the opinion of the body, it is the opinion of the president, of the chairman of the National Broadcasting Council. EMFA, of course, being quite a wide scope regulatory framework, rises at different approaches. For example, Chamber of Publishers are against, or the journalist organization are for. That's the situation we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was not really optimistic vision, and the potential impact on of EMFA, as you see, everything is about implementation, and it might get wrong in those captured states. But now I would like to ask Teresa to go a little bit more into the future. And answer the question to what extent the regulation actually are able to cover the challenges media face in vis-a-vis a growing AI use and the question of platform dominance on the markets. Thank you.
All right. Does this work? Yes. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for having me. And okay. Oh, it's okay like this. Thanks. Thanks again for having me. And as Dominika already said, I'm going to dive into a bit more the question of media concentration and specifically how to deal with big tech and AI in the current situation. So just to quickly run up the foundations again, why does it matter? Well, it's quite obvious because journalistic power stems from economic power. And this has its normative constitutional embedding. It's, as Baker famously wrote on media concentration, that media power is like political power and therefore needs to be dispersed. And also the European Court of Human Rights and the German Bundesverfassungsgerichtshof also famously argued that there is no democracy without pluralism. And especially when it comes to the power over opinion formation, there needs to be rules in place that disperse this opinion power. But what is changing now that we really need to rethink how we deal with platforms, AI, big tech, and so on? Well, there are new powerful political actors. We have new power concentrations in the media, and this power over opinion formation, opinion power, is shifting to other non-regulated actors. These power concentrations are mostly, of course, the big famous platforms, Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. And these power sources are changing in terms of what they used to be. These companies have very strong market powers, data powers, algorithmic computational power, and power over the technological and infrastructures that media organizations rely on and that they also process on. So to dive into the opinion power thing a little bit more, because I think this is what really gives it the fundamental basis, and what also makes it so difficult is because this power of opinion formation is shifting away from legacy media to platforms, but they are by no way regulated in terms of this far-reaching media political power that they have. This is on several levels. I don't want to go into too much detail to give some room for questions, but just briefly, as individuals, as citizens, platforms play a larger role in how we access, consume news at the institutional newsroom level. As I already mentioned, big tech platforms more and more provide the infrastructures and tools and so on that are used for news production and news distribution. And all of this has implications for the wider media ecosystem. And in terms of AI specifically, the problem is quite obvious again, because AI requires such large data and computing power to develop. This power is again mostly with the same few big tech companies, which creates again the situation of how Kate Crawford calls it, the great houses of AI, which can lead to further infrastructural and industrial capture of the media sector on platforms. So what's being done about it? Traditionally, there is media concentration law, national media concentration laws. They diverge in countries. Some countries have more elaborate concentration laws with proper media pluralism tests. Others, as already mentioned earlier, conduct media merger assessments, for instance, merely on from a competition perspective. But these tools are completely outdated when it comes to the developments around datafication, digitalization, and platformization. So the EU is very much aware of the problem, not only of concentration in general, but also of the growing concentration trends triggered by big tech and by platforms. So there were some previous attempts in the past to regulate media concentration, like mostly in the 1990s, but they were mostly rejected due to the competence issue. In the EU, the EU Democracy Action Plan, there was again another push to regulate for protecting media pluralism and to address media concentration. But also there, the Commission pointed out that this responsibility should primarily be with the member states. So I'm going to skip the recitals, but Article 21, we already heard about it, is the most relevant one in the EMFA proposal, and it basically asks member states to provide rules for effective assessments of media market concentrations that can have an impact on media pluralism and editorial independence, and they provide a few elements to be taken into account. An open question still is, as far as I know, is in terms of these elements, which element takes precedence, which one, is it an either or is it an and list of elements? And in general, this list of elements still needs to be, there needs to be further guidance in terms of how to actually implement this. So what are the potential in all of this? So on the one hand, of course, the EMFA can play a standard-setting role and create a push to harmonize for the media pluralism test in media mergers. It can also facilitate cooperation between national authorities, knowledge exchange, and perhaps more cooperation in assessing the role of big tech in media mergers. But there are obviously a lot of limitations. First of all, of course, the question of EU competence, because the EMFA is an economic instrument in some way. It's based on Article 114 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. Therefore, it is steered towards addressing competition issues, and there are a lot of normative concerns that remain open that the EMFA cannot address, and for that, national implementation and enforcement is most relevant. And as we already heard, this if enforcement is not effective and if national regulatory authorities are not independent, also the EMFA cannot be enforced effectively. There are some other tools at EU level that play a role in how to address this opinion power of big tech platforms and of the growing power of AI. So we have the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, and as already mentioned, the AI Act proposal. The potential there, of course, is that it can address this data and market power, and it can, to some extent, address competition concerns. For instance, the DSA implements some rules on algorithmic transparency and user choice and recommender systems and so on. But there are limitations, as I already mentioned. The focus is on economic concerns and not on media pluralism. These tools are not designed to address media pluralism concerns. Also, especially in the AI Act, there is absolutely no mention of journalism specifically. So it doesn't actually address the social and cultural risks that are associated with AI for the journalism sector in any way. And lastly, the asymmetrical relationships between the media and big tech companies will still remain, which the DSA, DMA, or AI Act don't address effectively. If anything, they might even give more power to big tech companies. Okay, so how can we deal with all of this in the future? It's a big question. So EU media regulation, if you can call this. There are some, of course, due to the competence limitations, there are some ways how EU law and the EMFA can still play a role in really facilitating and harmonizing the media sector for media pluralism. For instance, it can enable fairer competition and therefore provide space for alternative providers, alternative digital infrastructures to be developed. It can play a role in enabling the media sector to be more independent in terms of innovation and so on. On the national level, of course, media laws need to be reformed. There needs to be investments into independent media, into local media, legal aid, and so on. The public service media needs to be upheld as a very important public good, which in the Dutch context is also not a given anymore with the recent elections. And lastly, as I said, there need to be some political and democratic safeguards, and that means not just in terms of media capture, but also in terms of the lobbying force of big tech companies. They play a large role in the development of the AI Act, for instance, and there should be, the media journalistic sector institutions should have a seat at the negotiation table as well, and not just big tech companies, as is currently the case with the AI Act. All right, I think that's it, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. We still have more than 15 minutes for questions, comments, remarks, whatever comes to your mind. So please raise your hand and use the opportunity that our speakers are here with really deep knowledge of the EU legal framework.
Thank you. My name is Andrej Kolko from Slovakia. Very fascinating ideas. I have some questions and comments. Nobody asked, so I will take the floor. What about this state advertising? Does it include also state companies, fully owned or partially owned companies? Because there are many of such, and how does it comply with their right to do kind of business? Of course, it's not really business because they are state companies, but they can claim that. The second question, actually, this is the fundamental question for all presentations here and for all discussion here. I think the behind is, as the last speaker said, the idea whether we want to federal Europe or confederal or national state-dominated Europe. That's the idea behind all these counter-feedback, counter-reactions are based on this, I think, the political reactions, basically. And one comment is, I think, for Slovakia, 2 comments because I'm from Slovakia. So I think there was a mistake. It was 2023 and not 2013. But the second is, I think this reaction from Slovakia, the huge reaction, I think it was related probably, my hypothesis is by a local campaign by some of these alternative media, because they asked probably their readers and followers to react to this activity, the initiative by the Commission, etc. So that's behind the common folks who are now very heavily present on the internet. So they reacted like kind of emotional reactions. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can gather some more questions and then give each of the panelists time to answer. No.
It's more general questions for the panelists. What impact do you think will the European Media Freedom Act have on the media landscape in the EU?
Yeah, hello, Patrick Lausch from Deutsche Welle, head of European Affairs, so the chief lobbyist, so to say. Lucy, you said that the self-regulation must be strengthened, but not initiatives like the Journalism Trust Initiative. Can you explain a little bit why you don't focus on this kind of initiatives?
Thank you for the question. We actually had a small discussion just before starting the panel about this question, so we are thinking about it. Is anyone else having some reflection or comments? So maybe let's give the floor to our panelists now to reply and take the question, whichever you want and you feel like. So maybe let's take the order of how we were presenting.
Okay, maybe I can just answer on your first question. Yes, I think that it is for state companies, because without it, it will be, you know, invaluable. Because I came from Croatia, where is this model of captured media. It's not just in Croatia, but we have like full capture on the local and a national level. On a local level, where local authorities thinks that public money is money for their propaganda. We try to propose some better models, but only 2 or 3 mayors accept it, and that's what we are very concerned about. This number of people in EMFA, and the state advertising is like covered most of big media outlets on a national level, and yeah, I think that it is also will cover state companies. So, and then, floor is yours.
So if that's okay, I would take this Journalism Trust Initiative question. Yes, this is something which Dominika also mentioned at the beginning. Actually, for lawyers, it's a nice tool, obviously, and that's how Commission also at the beginning was thinking about how to define recognized media for the purpose of EMFA, of the law. But so they wanted also to offer, let's say, to the market to promote this tool in this regard. We discussed it with our colleagues from other states, from French, as Reporters Without Borders. It's their initiative, and French colleagues' experience and opinion is very similar to us, supported by their view that it's actually first of all, not fair. The whole assessment or audit, how they call it, is very expensive. So small media cannot afford it. So if a media service provider, how EMFA calls it, wants to declare itself as a high quality in whatever, it cannot afford to pay. Small outlet cannot afford to pay this expensive audit. So this is a discrimination in this. In this tool, we have a similar initiative in Czech Republic, this media rating, and what we saw, the algorithms, sometimes the results show really a different picture of the reality simply. So through algorithms, it's quite easy to get to fulfill the requirements like the transparency of the ownership or some basic points to be declared as transparent and fulfilling all this. But in reality, who is behind? That's a question. So we have one specific case that so-called news media owned by a local politician who is really a lobbyist and engaged into the even mafia structures actually has a good note in this rating. So the algorithms, of course, don't recognize the reality. The content is being misused to influence, to manipulate media, the public opinion, especially before elections. So, and this horrible outlet has a good note in the rating. So we see it as a highly problematic. And also the last point on this, it can also be misused, of course, by if the tool gets into hand. We can imagine of a Fico's government or whoever. Corruption can be everywhere. So that we have conditions like this here now doesn't mean that in 2 years that will be the same, and we can just think about what would happen if such a tool would be misused. So then you would just kill all the independent media very quickly and easily. Yes, so that's why we don't want this. And self-regulation is much more safe, we think. We are convinced. But we need to promote it and support because to make it efficient again. Thank you. But thanks for this question.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. I'm also looking at our audience if there are investigative journalism, because from their concerns and what I heard recently is that actually the auditing company are very often present in their stories as the one having shady business around or enabling shady business. So to what extent it is ethical to use this company to audit and then label who is trustworthy as a media? This poses a question, and I guess we need to answer and have more answers and discussion around this. The floor is yours, Teresa.
Okay, I will address this very broad question about how the EMFA will change the media landscape in the EU. And at least from my perspective and from the problems I presented just now, it won't do much, neither will the AI Act, nor the DSA, nor the DMA, really, to be honest, because what they don't do is they don't address the structural power imbalances that exist. In fact, actually, the Article 17 would even give platforms to some extent more power, because you put them in a position to decide over who is a media actor and who isn't. They are, I think, as far as I read it, they're supposed to assess whether or not a media actor is editorially independent or not, and this is a responsibility to give to a private company, platform company, that is, I think, going the wrong direction. And besides that, if you also, if to focus more on the EMFA specifically, if the goal is to regulate for media pluralism and protect media pluralism, why do you not at all mention the role of platforms or the role of other actors as access and distribution services, which plays a major role in how we consume news, in the diversity of opinions, and so on. And as a final point, maybe to say, I heard it a few times already, because what the EMFA I don't think addresses properly in the concentration assessments is also the protection of local journalism, smaller media organizations, because these concentration trends that we're seeing, they affect local and small news organizations the most, and the dependence on big tech companies, on platforms, on existing infrastructures will only get worse and worse. So the only way to really counteract this, is what you mentioned, is through some sort of collaborative self-regulation, the Paris Charter and so on, to at least put some ethical professional standards in place for the use of AI and for the use of certain digital infrastructures in the journalistic profession. But this is just from the external view.
Thank you, Tadeusz. I also have one question, because we are running out of time and probably we will be finishing soon. But actually, I wanted to ask it earlier on. To what extent the fact that we don't have a definition of what is actually media pluralism in the EMFA and how we understand the notion of pluralism, is it an obstacle and in the implementation, and how this will impact? And maybe if we have a second round, this is a question to all of our panelists, because I think defining what we think, how we define whether it's external, internal pluralism seems crucial in at least deciding by the antitrust bodies and regulatory authorities about the concentration issues.
Well, it's so complicated a little bit, because I have a certain experience with trust authority. I prepared a kind of expertise for them. Of course, here it was noted that the existing competition law is outdated. Maybe you are right, but still, concentration, yes, it's a bit outdated. Maybe you are right, but in practice, it is very difficult, first of all, to define the relevant market, which is not easy, believe me, in such a very competitive market itself, because everyone has access to many sources of information and entertainment. Secondly, EMFA, if we talk about EMFA first, if it will be accepted, I hope so. We are talking about the perspective of 2026, at least. 2 years, it's this period for the implementation, or maybe even, I don't know. The first proposal was 4 years, so it's like this. Nevertheless, we are talking about future, and media are changing very fast. The landscape can change immediately. And as in the aspect of artificial intelligence, it will be absolutely delayed. I'm sure for that. I think there are some initiatives. For example, in Poland, since 10 years, local editors tries to forbid media activity by the local government. So simply they could not, but they are unsuccessful. They formulate this idea, but it's not accepted by the law, by the politicians, because there is a kind of the relation between the local authorities and the media they own. My experience with the state-owned companies is like this. It's quite different maybe than in other case, because at least, according to my estimation, the state and all the state expenditures on advertising, it is close to 6% of the advertising market. It means that it has no any dominant influence on the market, because market itself is, first of all, commercial market. And however, it doesn't mean that in certain cases, this amount of money is not sufficient to develop those media who are supporting government. Fortunately, they didn't have any strong market position. There were a lot of money and a very weak market position. That's a paradox, that it's not a business. It was just a political decision about giving them money, not because of the market reasons. Usually, if you put money into advertising or marketing activities, you think about efficiency of your investment. Not in this case. That's the problem. But I think that the number of state-owned companies will be, in the coming years, lower and lower again.
Thank you very much. I think it's time for us to wrap up and finish the panel. So I would like to thank a lot our panelists for giving some input and their remarks on the EU legal framework. I have the impression that we are all the time speaking about a minimum of standards, especially in context of directives. So states can go much further than what is predicted in the directive. And talking from a Polish perspective, before the October election, I would say we were very happy to have the EU directive and having a kind of stick for us to implement changes. But now with the new reality, we are very hopeful that maybe we could go much further than that, at least as SLAPs are concerned. So I would always keep in mind that what is EU proposing is the minimum, and we can still do a lot of work in the countries around better regulations and reform. Thank you very much, and wishing you all a fruitful day and nice discussions. Thank you.